All right, everybody, welcome back to the Something About Soccer podcast. I am your host, Dill40K, and I am joined today by BizarraBrigade.
What's going on, guys?
And Pixelatedsuits. As always, the gang is all here, and we got a special episode for you today. It's one of two episodes coming in the next 2 weeks revolving around the Club World Cup. And me, in my ignorance, I looked through my kits and I put on a Barcelona one, assuming they were there. And Pix told me they weren't. So, embarrassing. But other than that, guys, before we get into it, how are you guys doing? Pix, how are you doing?
Dude, I'm doing pretty good. Nice weather over here. I didn't think to wear a kit, but I'm glad I didn't wear the wrong one. So,
yeah, it's all right. That's the Red Bull's alternate, the one that the blue collar kit, just a nice little white tee.
Exactly.
Biz, how about you, bro?
I'm hanging in there. I in between episode to episode, I've been recovering from the flu, so you might hear it a little bit in my voice. I feel like I'm on the backswing of it enough to be able to record at least. So, but yeah, I was going through it for the last week, but yeah, we're on the other side of things.
Good. I'm glad you're on the mend, and we set this up perfectly. This is your flu game, and I'm going to hit you first to start it off. You're our guy for this type of information. What is the Club World Cup, and where can people watch it?
Yeah, so the Club World Cup is I think the latest rolled out controversial thing that FIFA's done is probably the answer to that question. But I, for one, am always, I think I said this when I was discussing in my own personal Twitch chat the other day about being excited for it, because I'm just a sucker for anytime FIFA decides to pit like some matchups that diversify the types of teams that would typically be able to play together, whether it's in a national team setting or in a club team setting. I'm usually like, I feel like many of us are, I'm going to take the bait, is say what you will about FIFA, but I think that's something that like, just, I don't know, it plays to the inner child in me of understanding that that's like always something I've been fascinated with. So I feel like FIFA kind of takes advantage of that when it comes down to these types of tournaments that they put together. But the Club World Cup is what I think FIFA is hoping the actual World Cup is, but on a club scale, right? It's you're having and hosting all of these various champions that have won their own continental championship over a 4-year period. So this is going to happen like the World Cup would happen, with the long, arduous qualification process that happens with all the national teams. But this is going to be a little different. There's going to be four separate years of qualification processes for each team. Obviously, other confederations like Europe are going to have some extenuating circumstances with like the bids and stuff like that to make it a round number, with now the expanded field of this being 32, because the Club World Cup's also, we won't get into all the history of it, but has had kind of various faces over time here that they've tried to maybe throw some things at the wall and figure out what would be the best way to go about doing this. But the Club World Cup now is in the 32 team framework that they've laid out, is, I think, probably the best way that they've attempted thus far. I think a lot of people are still in the I don't really care phase for the most part, but I do think that there's a lot of potential with it. And so there's teams from all across the world: Europe, Africa, Asia, North and South America, even an oceanic team has made it. So we're going to be able to see just that diverse grouping of teams playing at a non-exhibition level, which is something that I feel like for club teams is a very rare thing, with all of the fixture congestion and all the scheduling that all these teams have to go through with all of their own leagues and all of those different things. So I think that in itself is what makes this tournament stand out. And then on top of it too, which we'll get into later, is what FIFA is backing this with. They're trying to back it with a lot of prize money and trying to get people to really care in that way to monetize it, so some of these European teams do take it seriously. And honestly, it incentivizes it for the smaller teams too in that regard. So I can't wait for it. You'll be able to see it for free. So there was a TV, kind of a little bit of a TV bidding war over it. And it ended up going to a company by the name of what we found out later was called DAZN, which I still, someone needs to explain to me how that's what we get out of DAZN. But apparently I heard the announcer on the LAFC playing game say that was the name of it. I'm like, okay, that colored me shocked because that's not what I would have figured.
What would you have gone with?
I don't know, Dazen or
I would have gone a dozen as well.
Dazen, something like that.
Dazen.
Like, I don't know.
Dazen.
Yeah, Dazen. But so yeah, DAZN will have all of the games worldwide for free, which we've verified that, at least on our end, that going through it and making an account, I was able to log in and actually get into that LAFC playing game even. So this is something that they have offered, and that's, I think, what I also find very cool about this is the fact that FIFA is trying to find a home for it where it is accessible for everybody. Because I think when it comes to this, that is something that is kind of like that's a non-negotiable when it comes down to this. So yeah, fun. I mean, we have a lot to talk about today, but from an introduction standpoint of just so you know, if you're completely unfamiliar with what the Club World Cup is altogether, they're really trying to make this kind of like the hub for all club teams that are the champions to meet in one single spot to play, kind of that one final tournament to anoint the real true world champion, which I think is really, really a cool concept when it comes down to it.
I mean, at the end of the day, we have all asked it in bed before. Who is better, Jordan Morris or Desiree Douay? And we will see that.
It's crossed my mind once or twice.
I'm going to come to you before we get into the good, the not so good, and the controversial, because there has already been controversy with this Club World Cup. What makes this one particularly special? That could be broad, that can be specific to you, but I'm interested to hear from you.
Yeah, I think that one of the big things, as Biz kind of touched on, is the expanded field and the ideas that kind of, with all the money that we're going to talk about moving forward, especially on the specifics, but with the amount of money and the backing that FIFA has put into it, I think that there's going to be a really big push on making this something that isn't just this year. This is something that's going to be continuing for every 4 years from now as well. So I think that making it and setting it as a really good precedent and having all the teams be competitive and having a really good competition and really good fan experience and fan engagement from an early on is going to be really crucial for FIFA. And I think that they're trying to do that with, some of the things that they're doing with the money that they're putting in, some of the things where they're trying to bring in, a more diversified field than we used to have. And especially when you compare to a lot of the international competitions, inter-club competitions that we used to have, I think it's going to be so interesting to have the World Cup style where we have group stages. I'm a sucker for group stages. I kind of hate that the Champions League got rid of it. Everybody has their opinions on them, but I love group stages, and group stages in the summer. I mean, it's one of the best things for me. So I'm really excited for the Club World Cup. There's a lot of things that there are to criticize, rightfully so. But overall, as a tournament, I think that there's so much that's going to be exciting, especially just seeing teams that you've never seen, and teams that you've never seen match up against each other, play against each other. So I'm really excited for that.
All right, well, I appreciate that, and yeah, I totally agree. This expanded field makes it super special. A lot of representation across the entire world, and I feel like this has been the biggest push in terms of marketing for this sort of competition that we have seen. So I am excited for it, but I would like to start off this roundtable conversation about the Club World Cup with the controversial. But we're gonna preface it with the CONCACAF teams. This is a CONCACAF centered podcast. We talk a lot of MLS as well as national team stuff and other leagues around North America. And the 5 qualified teams in CONCACAF of the 32 from around the world are CF Monterrey, CF Pachuca from the Mexican League, and then Inter Miami, LAFC, and Seattle Sounders FC. And the one that is controversial is the way that LAFC got in. I'm not sure if you guys heard about the whole controversy of, multiple teams from one ownership group getting into it. But Pix was the one I think that initially brought it up to us. And it always has to revolve around a Colombian player. Pix is the one breaking the news. So Pix, did you want to kind of explain a bit of that controversy, and then we can kind of give our opinions on it and just talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, so the original person who had the club spot was Club Leon. And then they basically got investigated from a team called Alajuelense or La Liga in Costa Rica, who kind of spearheaded that investigation and kind of called them out on the fact that they have these, they basically have the same owners as Pachuca in Mexico. So because Leon and Pachuca had the same ownership, Alajuelense or La Liga were pushing towards having them kicked out of the Club World Cup. And they were sort of vying themselves because they had won one of the continental competitions themselves. They were trying to vie in to get into that path, but instead of them being in, they had LAFC versus America in a playoff. So yeah, that's how they got in there.
Well, Biz, what do we think about that? Should teams from those multiple organization group, like those multiple ownership teams, be allowed in? I'm surprised there wasn't more controversy. That situation didn't arise with the rise of these type of organization groups around the leagues, and I feel like we're only going to see more questions about this as these super, ownership groups kind of absorb more teams. You're seeing it with like the Chelseas and the Strasbourgs of the world, the City Group. They're obviously here at the Club World Cup, so this isn't the last time this question is going to be posed. And I feel like it may have been less of an issue, or maybe the ownership group kind of got a little bit more rolled over since it was in the CONCACAF region. Maybe European organization groups might make a little bit more of a stink about it and try and push back. This is just all my opinion on it, nothing in fact. But Biz, what do you think? Do you think this could be a controversy moving forward into other Club World Cups if this continues to happen?
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point on where I think this is probably heading. I think if we're going to be doing a giant scaled tournament of this size, I do think that there's going to just be there's more potential for things like this to happen, and kind of where paths are going to collide more frequently. And I think a lot of times when it comes to ownership, just based on where a lot of these conglomerates are going, is they're trying to, maybe hand select certain spots within various different confederations to make sure that this wouldn't necessarily happen, right? Some are maybe a little more thoughtful than others on where they're going. I mean, like obviously we just said with Club Leon and Pachuca being within the same league. I mean, that's pretty ridiculous, and that's something that you probably don't see all the time, where you're having two teams from the same first division league. But when it comes down to it too, I mean, like we're even seeing an example with another team within the Club World Cup dealing with this outside of the Club World Cup hierarchy with John Texter and Botafogo. We're dealing with potentially the Crystal Palace Europa League disqualification right now, of if that's up in the air for discussion. And that's something that I think we're going to start seeing more and more of this with a tournament of this. If this tournament starts to gain some traction and there is prize money tied to it, there's a stature involved. I mean, I even just saw something as simple as there's going to be a crest that the winning team's going to be able to wear for 4 years on their jersey going forward. Wow. Where they're trying to make this more, they're trying to give it notoriety. They're trying to make it more emblematic of being the best team in the world for 4 years. You know what I mean? So yeah. I think that's something, when you have those things that you're also highlighting, I think that you're also setting the stage where all of these different confederations are meeting at this one single point. And that issue is, if you have a Red Bulls, for example, if you have the New York Red Bulls and the Red Bulls win the MLS Cup and then go on to win Champions League, it's you're going to be also dealing with that, and maybe Leipzig gets in, or or Salzburg gets in, or so it's you're going to see stuff like that happen a little bit more frequently, because so much money. And I feel like football just across the board right now is starting to get top heavy, with a lot of the one percenters starting to really hand pick certain spots to help kind of build their portfolios. You're starting to see that. You're starting to see that is going to maybe start almost causing problems for those people when it comes to being able to maintain and keep all of those different teams, on the same linear path and track that they go, because not all of them are going to be able to do it just based on what the FIFA rulings are. And I mean, we've already kind of seen with some of the financial fair play stuff that, very what UEFA is doing right now. Is there a pathway where teams are going to start figuring out ways to loophole that? Are there going to be ways where I
also think, this first ruling on it, the precedent may be set at the fact that, maybe multiple teams from an ownership group can go in if they're in a different league, but the fact that, they are both from Liga MX makes it a little bit more cut and dry for a first, stab at that case. I feel like it might be hard. They will definitely argue that. It's it's because there's two teams from the same league going in. It shouldn't be a problem if, Chelsea and Strasbourg go in. They won, their respective leagues. I'm not saying that would happen realistically, but that's kind of where my mind goes. So it is interesting to see, and maybe it's only going to come to a head every 4 years. This isn't something that's going to be ever present, but the landscape of world club football is going to be changing a lot every 4 years. So these conversations are going to have to be had and are going to be super important. I thought it was interesting. I honestly agree with the decision. It does feel like, you wouldn't want to stay on like a monopolized type of, footballing conglomeration dominating the entire, league that they're in. That almost feels like, the MLS now has 3 Red Bull teams, and both of them, all 3 of them are coming into the I don't know, but who knows? And how far, that now I'm just going down a rabbit hole, but how far does it go, with the American corporate structure? You have these super mega corporations that own all of these companies, and then what happens when what if that super ownership has companies or ownership groups that own other things? How far does it go in terms of what these rules mean for allowing teams in? I'm curious. So we'll see in the future. I think that, at this point, before the Club World Cup has started, that's probably the most controversial thing that has happened. Would you guys agree with that? Are we waiting for more news on anything more?
I think that's probably the most controversial one.
Yeah.
I think that one of the biggest things is like, there's a lot of Club Leon fans that still bought tickets, and we're hyped for it. So it's like, despite the fact that it's probably right, there shouldn't be 2 teams from the same league competing who have the same owners. It still sucks for the fans, it still sucks for the people who are excited for the tournament. So,
and those tickets ain't cheap.
Yeah.
I guess that's controversial too. I mean, those tickets are not cheap. And ticket culture in the U.S., where, we haven't mentioned, this is happening in the U.S. Is it? It's exclusively the U.S. for the Club World Cup. It's not expanding into any North American regions.
Correct.
I just wanted to see, because, I mean, me and Pix, Biz, what would be the closest for you to see a game?
I'd have to double check sites. It's either Chicago or Kansas City. I forget if Chicago was hosting them or not.
It's about a trek away, far away.
Yeah, Pix and I don't have as far of a trek, but I'll be trekking deep into my wallet to try and go to a game like that. But we'll see. I mean, they're playing at the Rose Bowl, which is pretty sick. Like that. That's where they do. That's where they try to do one El Tráfico a year.
Yeah,
that's a very iconic U.S. and California stadium that that's hosted a ton of events throughout the years. The Rose Bowl, which is a big college football venue and things like that. So I'm excited. I mean, we'll see once the games get started. If they're already this expensive for group stage games, I can only imagine once they start getting into the elimination games. But I feel like certain people in certain regions, for kind of the more low-key matchups, again, like, for those bottom 2 group teams, can sneak in a game maybe for a good price. I don't know.
I will say I'm only paying $50 a head for Porto Palmeiras, which is...
There you go. That's
it's not necessarily the top European teams, but I think that for that it's pretty good. And even then, I've seen Fluminense versus I think Ulsan, which is a team in Korea, for around like 30 for the cheapest.
That's the ticket, right?
Wow,
if it's a game that isn't going to be featuring any of the teams from UEFA, I feel like you'll obviously have some South American contingent in certain spots that are going to be like, there will be fervor for those. But I think the ticket is finding a game close to you. If there's like an African team playing or like an Asian team playing,
definitely.
That's not to say that those fans don't travel, but it's just going to be much less than what, locally here, there's just going to be so much. I mean, even just locals that would want to go see their South American teams if they have that heritage and they're from that area. So it's like, you're going to have more of that, I feel like, in the States here than what you would have for maybe Asia or for Africa right now.
And one of the other big things that I've seen too is that a lot of the ticket prices are dropping, especially I've seen that the opening game of Miami versus Al Hilal, I think it is.
I just read
the
that
team
too.
from Egypt has dropped almost, and the tickets were absurdly priced.
They're struggling.
They're like $250 in the beginning for Miami versus a team from Egypt, which deserves respect, but not for $250 a head. So I think that, if you guys are interested in going to a Club World Cup game, I would just, keep an eye out a week away from the games. Usually the tickets might even be cheaper than they are now. So I think that there might be some interesting games and interesting matchups in your area. So I think it's always worth looking at, the different ticket sites and stuff like that.
I mean, a Portuguese team against a Brazilian team is pretty iconic.
It's going to be great.
Cheap. That's pretty cool.
It's going to be so good because around where I live, there's a lot of Portuguese immigrants. So it's like... And there's a lot of Brazilian immigrants too, so I think that the stadium's gonna get really packed. And it's on a Sunday, so I'm taking my dad for that. So we're gonna try to go early and try to get into like the tailgates and stuff like that, and see, if we can schmooze up with some Porto and Palmeiras fans.
I like that. All right.
Two teams with big Colombian connections too. So
good point. All right, so let's get into the good a little bit here. like we just mentioned, teams that would never face each other regularly, getting to play each other in this tournament. I'm going to start with me because I kind of want to ask you guys just to say, we don't have to go too deep into each team, but is there like a certain team that you guys are excited to see? For me, from the thing that I love about soccer, as a world sport is the world stage that players from all over the world can be put on and where that journey takes them. So I'm super excited for teams like Mamelodi Sundowns to be coming to this tournament, putting South African players on the map for a bigger stage. Not to say that they're not already on the map, but if you guys remember that World Cup that was held in Africa, how much of a spotlight that put on players like that, and for them to, for African teams to, exactly. Oh my God, we will never forget the team dance choreography. Yep. That is just the streets will never forget that. But I am so excited for those type of storylines. That makes the football manager player in me. That makes my heart sing. That's what I feel like football and sports really is all about. That's why I think my other favorite sport in the world is the NBA, because it feels like the other world game. Baseball a little bit too, but to a lesser extent. But yeah, Mamelodi Sundowns are probably my team to watch. They're in the group with, let me double check. They are with Borussia Dortmund, Fluminense, and I think that's Ulsan. Yeah, so a really diverse squad in there. I am very excited to see how those teams kind of match up against one another. Pix, I'll go to you. What do you have one that do you want to highlight?
Yeah, so I mentioned it earlier. I'm going to go see Palmeiras versus Porto, hopefully. So that's a team that I'm going to be really keeping an eye out for, because I think that they're going to be able to represent, I think, South America in a really good light. I think that they're a really good kind of dark horse if you're picking teams outside of Europe for someone who could go far. One of the big things is that they've contained a lot of players that normally a team like Palmeiras would have sold, last summer or even in the winter. Right? Yeah, there's so many examples. They went out and got Facundo, yeah. So they have so many good players that they're keeping, and they're going to hold. They might even sell this summer potentially after the World Cup, the Club World Cup. But it's going to be really exciting for them to represent South America, especially because the South American team hasn't won anything like against a European side since 2012, Chelsea versus Corinthians. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see Palmeiras, especially because Palmeiras have a relatively easier group. And because I'm going to their
realistically, they should get through, right? I mean, Porto and Palmeiras are the favorites out of that group for sure. So Inter Miami would have to figure it out.
What about you, Biz? What are you thinking?
For me, I mean, it's pretty open-ended. I think the competition as a whole, like, to give like the blind answers, just based on all the storylines, I always get excited for like big tournaments like this. But I think like probably the thing, if I had to really pin it down, would just be, I just think like where all of the CONCACAF teams and like kind of how they stack up in a competition like this, because there's not a lot of track record over time with a lot of these teams. You'll see some Mexican teams make the formal what used to be Club World Cup, where the setup and how it used to be staggered. A lot of the times, a lot of those teams couldn't even like get their feet wet. It would be more like they would be going into whoever was hosting. You would be playing a team that usually is in a different stage of their league season than what we were, whether it was MLS or if it's the Clausura or Apertura with any of the Mexican league teams that have made it in the past too. And I just feel like it's such an uphill battle in those circumstances, where the old format a lot of times would be you would play in the opening game because of just based on the Confederation's like coefficient ranking, and they would stagger it up to getting to the end where there would be some buys for like the UEFA teams and stuff like that. And so a lot of times you just see like, like a Club America or a Pachuca or whoever ends up making it, they'd maybe win a game and only get like 2 games if they went to, like all the way to like Morocco or something who was hosting it, and then they have to fly back. It's like, it was on at 2 a.m. and you don't even get to see it, and they got bounced right away. So it's like, it'll be cool. I think that's the thing that I'm most excited with for all of these teams, is the fact that like a team like Auckland City gets a legitimate 3-game trial to see what happens.
That's a great point.
Maybe they get thumped 10-0 in all the games. You know what I mean? Maybe they are just that much worse than everybody, but we don't know unless we play them. And I think those are the really fun storylines. I remember if we're going back to when the Confederations Cup was played regularly, and when you had the Oceanic squad Tahiti that made it, kind of out of nowhere. And I forget like the circumstances as to how they qualified, but I remember them being in there. And as a kid, like watching that in my teens and being so hyped to watch Tahiti get thumped like 15-0. But like just thinking it was so cool that Tahiti had qualified just in general. So I think those are always the things for me that like I am such like an underdog backer in tournaments like this. Always, I want the little teams to do well. So I'm always rooting for them. If they are able to hold even to like halftime, I'm like, oh my God, 0-0 against the squad. Those are always the things that I think get me really excited about these style of tournaments. And I think that's the cool thing about these tournaments is it gives the underdogs a chance and starts to make them feel a little bit more confident because it's you got nothing to lose, like I mean, and stuff like this. So I think that makes it super fun.
Something that you said really raised some bells with me in the sense that it hasn't been like a lot of the times when I speak about with like Liga MX fans, they often talk about when Liga MX teams were in the Copa Libertadores, which is the CONMEBOL's continental competition with the clubs. So it's really interesting because if the Mexican teams make a good statement, especially against South American teams, then they could, fight, especially even the MLS teams, they can start pushing towards, fighting for that. Because most Liga MX fans that I talk to would love for the Copa Libertadores and Liga MX fans to return to that. So I think that there's so much that is on the line for clubs to prove, for leagues to prove, for confederations to prove as a whole. So I think that that's going to be really interesting, especially when you put it into that perspective.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And it's not only, we mentioned in our document a little bit, the financial rewards for the teams are insane. It's like, it kind of reminds me of this story I read this morning, a little unrelated, but, in terms of the impact it can have on these teams, Kelleher, the keeper for Liverpool, got sold to, what is it? He's a Brentford's new keeper, right? After Flecken left. The Irish team that he got sold from got like $3.5 million. From
it's like
that
an
deal.
Amateur team too, right? It was like a fourth division Irish
super
team.
small team. So it's like
crazy.
Because I saw you put in the doc that Auckland is earning 10 times their yearly salary.
Yeah, that is nuts.
That is
a good
just by participating in it. So
for
each win, that's only going to make it more so. So especially in a league like that, the A League that has salary caps, they had a little bit more money just as a result of them not having some of the registration rules because they're in New Zealand. But despite that, them having a salary cap, that's going to set them up so that they can actually be more competitive in the A League moving forward. So I think that's so good. And imagine if a team like the Costa Rican team had gotten in, they would be able to dominate the Costa Rican league for the next 10 years if they had gotten, with just the money of qualifying, So, and if you couple that with just, a draw or a win and those competitive bonuses that you get too.
Auckland City had just they just joined the A League too, didn't they? Wasn't that like within a year?
So that's why they had a little bit more on the salary cap.
What an interesting team.
That could be James Rodriguez next team with that much money available.
There you go.
A little mercenary.
Yeah.
Well, outside of the teams, obviously we got to highlight some players as well that we're excited about. And this provides a great opportunity for individual players to put themselves on a showcase that they might never be seen. It's one thing to be scouted by European scouts, outside of Europe, if Europe's the goal for certain players or even any other place, but to be put on a world stage. But it's another thing to be able to play against some of the best teams in the world and really show how you stack up. Maybe your team doesn't stack up to the likes of, Real Madrid, Juventus, squads like that. But if individual play can be shown from like players from Auckland, Mamelodi Sundowns, some of the Asian teams like Ulsan, and what was the other one? There's another Asian, Urawa Red Diamonds. Teams like that. It's very, very exciting to see. I saw the goalkeeper from Al Ain had a really nice quote in regards to this moment. For me, so I'll read it really quickly. For me, these will be some of the most beautiful matches of a lifetime, ones I'll remember for decades, ones I'll tell my siblings, children, and friends about. I will always tell my teammates in the dressing room that these are the matches that reveal who you really are as players and a person, and that's in regards to him and his team getting to play against the likes of Juventus and Manchester City. And, Al Ain come from the Saudi league. And
or UAE, actually, I think.
Oh, you're right.
They're UAE.
Correct.
Yeah.
And, he's played, this guy, he has played against other European talents who have come over here and played there. But this is a whole different beast. And, there are opportunities for players from these areas to get moves or just to, like he mentioned, to have memories of a lifetime. We kind of get caught up in, the transfers and the results and all these things. But at the end of the day, it is, just a human experience for some of these people to like get to do these things. And if any of us got to do something like that, we would never, ever forget that. That's a core memory. That's a core memory. So you did note one guy here, Pix, that of course we have to talk about a little bit. The drip god himself of Palmeiras, Richard Rios. Do you think he could be making a move as a result of the Club World Cup? And are there any other players, Biz, think about it while Pix is talking about our guy over here, that, could be making a move from a good Club World Cup performance? And I would also like to say, too, I'd like to draw this conversation after teams making moves actively right now to prepare for the Club World Cup and how serious these teams are taking it, because Manchester City is trying to put in so many moves, like 3 big moves before the Club World Cup to prepare their team for it. So it's not like this is like a joke competition or anything. These teams are taking it a lot more seriously than sometimes, I feel like fans would assume they are. So
yeah, no, definitely. I think that speaking on Rios, I was really surprised that he didn't get a move after the Copa America. I think that he had a lot to do with our Copa America last summer. But I think that now is a time, I think he's around 25. I think Palmeiras is a great level for him, but I really want to see him challenged, especially as he's someone who's regularly basically coming into the Colombian midfield. And there's another player in John Arias, who's another Colombian midfielder who plays a lot and almost starts on our right wing most games. Fluminense, who's another one who might transfer out. But in addition to those players who might get transferred out, I also kind of wanted to highlight some players who are, making their last dances. One in Modric, who's going to be playing the World Cup in Real Madrid. And he's even going to have Trent by his side, getting him a little bit into the Real Madrid squad.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, that's so crazy.
It's going to be interesting to
that.
see.
Yeah, weird.
Like Modric, one of I think like Modric is one of the biggest Real Madrid players in the last 10 years of all those
Modric
Champions League that he had. So having this as that crown jewel would be really special for him. And the other player that I was thinking about was it Kevin De Bruyne? Is he going to be staying for the Club World Cup or?
I honestly,
I have not seen with everything with Napoli with him on what the
I had one more player, but I forgot what team I was thinking. But yeah, I mean, Modric is one of the big ones. The other one I was thinking was actually Thomas Muller. Thomas Muller at Bayern was talking about his experience at Bayern, but he was also speaking about him being a football fan first and a player second, and him really wanting to experience he's obviously, as a European, he's never been able to experience the fan passion of the Bombonera in Argentina and Boca Juniors, but he'll be able to experience even an increment of that, of that Bayern versus Boca match. So I think that those storylines and those last dance sort of things, especially with these players who represent teams like Muller for Bayern and Modric for Real Madrid, and even Kevin De Bruyne for City. I think it's going to be really cool to see them kind of lead the way and kind of even, let's say if there's some teammates who aren't as motivated to play, maybe they're tired after the season. I think that, these players, these captains are going to want to maybe motivate them even more so light a bit of a fire.
I think that's a really interesting wrinkle that I didn't even think about. Like, there's no other time where you would see players coming in from a free, getting to play with players who had just played their last season with the team. Like, it's such an interesting, because it's created its own little transfer window time where players won't depart, but new players will come in.
And you're playing really competitive games.
And on top of it, they can be short-term contracts too, so they can literally just like pretty much sign for the tournament and then just dip out if they're just coming in too. Like that's the whole extra wrinkle.
Let's talk about that. Do we like that? The mercenary contract?
I kind of like it.
You like
personally,
it?
Okay, so let me give you my justification as to why.
This is like the pickup basketball thing. You pick up the really good guy you don't know. And
it is. Just the ringer. It's Carlos from the Benchwarmers. It's straight
just
up like
dunking on everybody.
Guy wrote on his driver's license in green crayon. Like this is that. No, we might as well just call this the Cristiano Ronaldo rule is what we should call it, because that's legitimately why it exists. But I personally think with this being a thing, I think this should be celebrated with players that are kind of like the mercenary like players that people want to see. I think that's what this tournament is. Like, it's supposed to be a spectacle. It's club tournament, so there is freedom of movement when it comes to transfers and all those different things. I think it's no different than like what we're used to here in the States with like players ring chasing for a season when it comes down to it, of like the minimum, taking lesser money on a minimum contract in the NBA to go try to chase a ring. What is the difference? You know what I mean? Of that versus a short-term contract. It's very similar when it comes to the actual aspects of what I think it has.
Well, it's a lot less of a commitment. I would say I don't know. I don't know. I don't think
commitment level, yes, but the concept is the same thing. It is you're signing to try to win something. It's pretty much why you're signing that, right? Or trying to bolster your own reputation, or there could be various reasons as to why. But I think this rule is going to realistically be for players, not exclusive to a Ronaldo, but I think most of the time it's going to be players that are like that, where it's going to be somebody like that is mainly going to be just re-signing with their team, like Bayern Munich with Leroy Sané, where he was out of contract, where he's probably just going to re-up it, and then they'll figure it out after the fact. But then there's also going to be situations where you do have a player that is like this, storied career journeyman that for whatever reason maybe his team doesn't want him back, but he wants another run at it. I mean, I've seen Ronaldo linked with all of these different teams. He's been linked with Monterrey. He's been linked with a Moroccan side. Like, it's like, what are we like? But I love it. Like, I want to watch that. Like, no matter where he ends up, I think just for the vibes of 40-year-old Ronaldo on like Monterrey with Sergio Ramos, you're telling me you wouldn't be hyped for that? I would be pumped. I think that would be so fun. So I think things like that I think it leads to some really fun storylines that like almost can be kind of dictated and like kind of nudged in the direction that like what FIFA kind of wants them to be, which I think it's smart for them in the long run to be able to have stuff like that, because this is you're kind of jamming this into a spot that a lot of people already have qualms with it, with like the fixture congestion, all those different things, right? But now you're kind of helping the cause with some of these players where like this weird little like contract purgatory that we're in. You're just kind of just taping some paper over the top of it and being like, you don't worry about the holes in the frame. We're good. Like we're gonna ignore that. The boat's not taking on water.
So you heard it here first. Biz wants Ronaldo at Mamelodi Sundowns leading the line.
Yep.
That's what it's all about.
That'd be awesome. I would go to that.
Take anything away from this podcast. That's what I want.
All right. I'm won over. I was being a hater. I want to see all the oldies join teams.
Yes,
I can't support James Rodriguez and not support Ronaldo.
Yeah, exactly. That's incredibly hypocritical. You can't do it.
Biz, did you have any other players that you're excited for? Just random shouts for guys?
I do have a couple, and it would probably be more players that I think would be featured moves. You guys know me. I'm like, I don't watch as much European ball as probably you two do, but it would be probably more CONCACAF players that I would highlight that I'm excited to see, that I think have potential to move on. And it also kind of ties into what you were mentioning, Dill, about a player being like as excited as he was for the opportunity. And so I watched a documentary on Obed Vargas earlier this
I saw that.
It was really a cool documentary. So for anybody that's not familiar, Obed Vargas is a defensive midfielder that grew up playing for the Seattle Sounders Youth Academy, but he started out in Alaska of all places. And the documentary is on YouTube. I forget I should be shouting out the publication that did it, because they did a great job.
I would think it was through DAZN. I think it was on the DAZN.
Oh, okay, maybe. Yeah, you might be right then.
Sorry, DAZN.
But through the actual entity that did the Club World Cup published it then, and they did a great job with it, and just kind of highlighted his, the decision between choosing between Mexico and the United States, and kind of gave his justification as to how he felt and why he felt the way that he did with that. He ended up choosing Mexico, so he is a Mexican national now. But yeah, he said, for him, first of all, that was not even a choice. He had always felt that way ever since he was really little, and just felt different when he got called in. He played for some of the U.S. Youth teams, but he just said when the Mexican anthem was playing, the first time he got called in, he said it was over. He knew it.
He got the goosebumps.
He got the goosebumps, and I always feel like when a player that has the dual national, you do kind of got to follow what makes the most sense. That's the key to it. But the thing that really stuck out to me that I thought was really cool about that documentary was the fact that he said since he was very, very little that he's been a diehard Atletico Madrid supporter, and they're in his group. So they're literally going to be playing Atletico Madrid, and he said he was sitting there with his fingers crossed, just praying that he gets to play them. And they're going to be playing them in Seattle in front of their supporters. So I thought that story was so cool.
In front of his whole family too.
In front of his whole family, the team that he wanted to play for. And now he's being rumored, because he is still very young. I want to say he might not even be 20 yet. He has been playing since he was I think he's the third youngest player in MLS history to actually get first team caps. The kid has been steady at
19.
Yeah, so 19, so not even 20 yet. So he's poised for a move. I know Bogert, who's kind of the MLS Fab Romano had tabbed him as a potential to move and kind of keep your eyes on in the summer. He's been linked with some European moves. So I think this is a huge tournament for him when it comes to those types of things. I could definitely see him, killing it this whole tournament, especially against the teams. He's going to be playing against 3 really top end teams, and it's 2 European squads and then Botafogo as well. So it's just like that is an incredibly difficult group. So he's going to be on display.
Probably the
for
hardest
everybody.
group.
That's group of death.
Teams.
They got hosed.
You just gotta show a little grit. 2-foot Griezmann, maybe Madrid like it after he re-signed his contract.
That's a good point. That's how you get Simeone signed to you.
It's the key. Maybe throw an elbow. Just let him know. But yes. So Obed was definitely one of them. I think the other one that I would point out too is actually playing a similar position, but it's a player that caught my eye in Champions League that I've kind of kept tabs on. But his name is Fidel Ambrez. He's Mexican as well. Plays for Monterrey, and I just I watched him a little bit in Champions League and kind of had been just like keeping tabs on him anytime Monterrey played, because I thought it was really out of place with how high the wage bill. Monterrey is like one of the 2 top spending teams in North America. They spend tons of money. That's the team where Sergio Ramos is, like I said. So that's like rumored to be favorite for Ronaldo right now. But this kid is a 21-year-old Mexican national team player playing one of the most key intellect spots on the field in defensive midfielder, and he's like regularly starting at 21. So I think that's a really key cog too that I would say I could see him potentially making a move as well that I would tell everyone to kind of keep your eyes peeled for, because I think that's a really cool storyline too, to have guys like that get. It's all those stories, right? It's all like the guys that we don't know from Mamelodi Sundowns that are gonna maybe jump onto the scene too, like you said, or players from any of the Urawa Red Diamonds, or players like that are gonna just that no one might have scouting sites on, that all of a sudden just kill it in this tournament, and then they're playing in Europe in a month, right? So it's that's the coolest portion about it. It's the thing that I always love about the World Cup too, where you have a guy that goes and scores 4 goals unexpectedly, and then all of a sudden he finds himself in a top 5 league. It's the best part, and some of the best storylines about all of this. It's why we do it.
Well, I will join you guys in the midfield conversation. Obviously, Football Manager fans and people who like banger goals, and this is gonna be a great opportunity for him. I think this is like a Richard Rios type move where
Scott McTominay, Scotty McBombs.
How'd you know? Franco Mastuano from River Plate, absolute wonder kid. Oh my God, he hit such a beautiful free kick in South America. I think he's going to be put on a great stage to really show what he's got. I mean, I feel like he's one of those guys who's already going to have a bidding war. He's going to be playing against Inter Milan, the Red Diamonds, and Monterrey. So definitely, I would say they're the second best team in that group. I don't know much about Red Diamonds or Red Dragons. Red Diamonds.
Red Diamonds, yeah, for Urawa. I saw Mastin Tuano too today. I actually saw him linked to Man City. That was being.
Oh wow!
I saw that too. And another big thing is that I'm not sure if this is his first call up, but I know that he's being called up for this current Argentine.
It was the first.
Team.
It's the first. Yeah, so
he might debut against Colombia.
Ooh,
and if he does, I'm scared.
I like that. It's funny that you mentioned Man City, and this will kind of transition into some of the other moves that they're making. But, I always got to shout out half Asian players. Tijani Reinders is close to signing with Man City in preparation for this Club World Cup, and obviously, past this. He is no mercenary. The AC Milan midfielder who is half Indonesian by his mother with a white dad, a tale as old as time. His brother actually plays for the Indonesian national team. He plays for the Netherlands, but very exciting. He's an incredible midfielder. And I'm excited to see him. And, dude, Man City, I think they're trying to get Ait Nori from the Wolves as well. They just picked up, dude, they had one other player. Now I'm forgetting it, but I don't know. I remember them saying they're trying to get 3 players for this Club World Cup, and it seems like they're close on all of them, which is just crazy. Wow. So yeah. I don't know what does that mean. What do you feel like that is a statement of intent for these teams making moves, really expediting moves for this tournament?
I mean, I think it's a good thing, right? It's what I think FIFA would prefer. I think it's what FIFA wants, but I think also too, having a stage set immediately where you're able to have players on display and not have to have that that post-season hype and hangover for some of those teams where you instantly get to just see those players injected straight into the team, I think is a really cool concept, because that's something too that when you think about it with really any sport, you're having the end of season hit, then you have kind of like the couple week lull of nothing going on, everyone's catching their breath after the season regardless of how it went, and then you're kind of slowly building up towards like, all right, if we're talking football, or if we're talking basketball, or like anything here in the States, you're having that like free agency talk, some of the trade chatter stuff like starts to happen, and then you get a little closer, and then you're starting to have like the training camps, or like players, the preseason starting to happen, and then you're starting to hear like the reporters or the beat reporters starting to give you some little tidbits of like, oh, so and so's looking really good, your new draft pick's looking great, and I think it just takes a little bit of time for you to kind of ramp up and get excited, and it's like a slow burn. But something like this happening instantaneously, it's like it takes all of that waiting away. And I think out of all of the sports too, soccer is the one that probably has the least of that, with it almost being pretty instantaneous. I mean, by far the shortest turnaround. It's almost a year-round sport when it comes down to it. And then you're adding, whenever there is a summer tournament, it really feels like you're never without it, right? When there's the actual World Cup, or you have something now featured like this, where it is Club World Cups, where people are just kind of going straight, wrapping around and going back to it. Because by the time this is done, it's going to be July, and you're only going to have probably about a month or so to catch your breath, a couple weeks. So it's a pretty crazy concept, but I think from a standpoint of entertainment value, it's a good thing.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I was able to find what I was talking about. Rayon Cherki is the player linked with City, the Lyon wing, who's an absolute gem. And also, another thing, Mastuano, rumors are the bidding battle is between PSG and Real Madrid, so two other teams in the Club World Cup. So I wonder if that deal were to progress, if you would stay with River Plate for the Club World Cup, or join one of those two teams, because that is one of their key players. That also creates an interesting storyline, poaching players from other teams right before the competition that you guys are both in. There's just a lot of different wrinkles in this competition, because it is just so different from what we are used to. But,
and I think the other thing with that too is the contract situation, where it's like you don't have to sell them because their contract's not going to expire 2 months later. So it's like the River Plate have, unless one of those teams are willing to pay more of a premium to release them for the Club World Cup, I don't think River Plate has to be pressured. Which we saw kind of with Palmeiras. So I think it's really interesting where you kind of take out the contract situation out of it, in a sense, because it's not like their contract's going to end in the middle of the summer. So.
Yeah. Well, and this kind of made me think of one other thing when you guys mentioned Sane at Bayern Munich, who is going to be moving on from that team. Does he play in the Club World Cup as he's waiting a move? What if he gets injured? There's things to think about in regards to that as well. Like, especially, it's different because he's a much younger player, Well, he's like, what is he, almost 30 now?
Yeah, he's like...
He's older than you think. I still remember him as like a wonder kid, I feel like. Yeah. Right? But, yeah. That's an interesting wrinkle as well. So we talked a lot about the good. I think we should as any conversation should go. Obviously, we should bring the vibe down and talk about the not so good. The one that I want to bring up here is, and because I actually didn't know too much about this, but one of you guys put in the document, and you deserve your shine. Seattle Sounders protest over continental competition bonus caps, and then for entire team equals one Real Madrid player winning it.
Yeah,
it's in the notes version, but
I'll cover that. So one of the big things is that the Seattle Sounders came out before matching up against Biz's team, actually, right? Minnesota United, wearing CWC equals cash grab tournament or something like that. I don't know what the exact phrasing was.
Club World Cup cash grab is what the shirt said.
Exactly. And a lot of people misinterpreted what the reality was of it, but one of the big things is, and what the Seattle players are specifically protesting, is that no matter what happens, all MLS teams are capped where they would have to share $1 million amongst themselves. So even if they go on to win the tournament and the team makes the $125 million, $1 million is going to be shared amongst the locker room however they deem fit. And then the Real Madrid side of it is that Real Madrid have already announced that if Real Madrid wins the competition, each player on the team is getting a $1 million bonus. So the amount of money that's shared in a locker room in Seattle is going to one player just for winning it if they do.
So this is shade at The Seattle ownership then?
No, this is I think more shade at MLS or
MLS in totality.
Yeah, because the MLS rules as they stand right now make it so any continental competition, any continental competition that isn't organized by the MLS, you have to share the bonuses, and it's a little bit different because there has never been a competition that has this amount of prize money.
It's an archaic rule. It's a little bit. I would say it's a little bit like one of those rules that at the time that it was written, it made sense, and now it's one of those where it definitely needs to be revisited with something of this gravity being existing, because I can totally understand why, if you look at like the framework of why where MLS was when it first started, why a rule like that was put in. And it was more to, I think, increase the validity of the actual MLS product itself and not have teams trying to circumvent it and go elsewhere or trying to do their own thing based on it being, we're kind of doing this all, like the whole isn't as great as the sum of the parts. Like we need everybody here kind of pulling their weight and doing this. And we can't have one team going rogue and playing in, I don't know, saying they got invited to Libertadores and somehow did well, right? And then all of a sudden now that team has $30 million and all these players got huge pay raises, and that ownership group has more money now, and I think that was the original thought process when it went into play. But now you have something like the Club World Cup, and you have players that are making certain finite amounts of money more than what they've ever made. And now it just looks like it's such a tone deaf, like classic, one of those rules where it's like, you look up like an old like town like statute or something like that. It's like it's illegal to like take a bath in your bathtub or something like that. You're just like, why does that rule exist? Yeah, exactly. Right. It's almost kind of gotten to the point of that type of rule based on where we're at with it. And on top of it, then, and sorry to kind of hijack this picks, but I had an article pulled up and I want to make sure to point this out, but Seattle owner Adrian Hanauer came in and like absolutely eviscerated the team after the loss about that move, which I thought was really random and out of pocket. And I know Seattle has not been thrilled, like Seattle supporters have not been thrilled with his ownership lately. Like it had been always like really positive, but over the last couple of years, it's kind of like, I feel like it's starting to kind of tilt into the sourness level a little bit. I would say specifically too, since their inclusion in this tournament, from winning and being the first MLS team to really ever in the modern era win the Champions League, you could argue that the spending hasn't necessarily been there for this team, and they haven't necessarily capitalized on some of these. I think Pedro de la Vega was a cool signing at the time, but if you really look at some of the turnover, I mean, like a player like Raul Ruidiaz is no longer there, and that was such a pivotal point. They're really relying on their youth academy now and really focusing on domestic products. And I mean, they literally don't even have I think they only have 2 or 3 foreign player spots. They've traded them all away, so it's
I mean, come on, give some love to the USMNTB team. Come on, Jesus Ferreira. Come on,
Jesus Ferreira.
That's disrespectful.
Scored his first goal 2 weeks ago. But no, I think all in all, a story like this is definitely a sour portion of it. But I think there is, in classic MLS fashion, I do feel like there's more context here as to why it's happening. But I also understand and totally feel that they're justified for going out and saying that this is stupid, it should change, because it makes no sense. It really doesn't.
Nothing like the rich owner being the one getting mad about people under him wanting more money.
Right.
It would have been better from anybody else but him, to be honest. Maybe the coach. Maybe win the game before wearing those shirts or something like that. But that's classic. That's classic. Okay. I guess this can transition pretty well into an overall conversation to kind of wrap up, talking about the not so good is, does the Club World Cup hurt or help the MLS? And I know some of you guys have a little bit of notes about Inter Miami's hosting rights that we can talk about a little. We already talked about fixture congestion, stuff like that, so we don't have to get too deep into that. But I'm curious, Biz, do you think this helps or hurts?
Well, I think you can kind of go a lot of different ways with that question on if it does help or hurt. Because I think even just a situation like we just highlighted, I think it highlights some of the goofiness and the wonkiness of the league. I think when you put teams like kind of in a spotlight in comparison, where you put them in like a police lineup and next to all the other teams, right? And you're like saying like which one's not like the other, and like MLS is going to stick out like a sore thumb in a lot of regards, and some for some good, some for bad. And I think the biggest thing for me is just what the teams and what the builds look like. I think on top of it too, you could even mention, and we can even go into the Inter Miami hosting rights thing being maybe a little bit of an offshoot of what we were just talking about how FIFA is controlling the narrative of the types of players they want to see, right? So I think this is going to be a common theme where Inter Miami is kind of like the plastic club joke for the league that I follow and that you guys follow in MLS, right? So it's a team that I think a lot of people, they're kind of the easy punching bag right now based on how they've kind of stockpiled talent over the last few years and what they've looked like. And now they just kind of they're just thrown this life preserver of like, no, you guys are in it because Messi's here. And I think a lot of people were really pissed off about that, specifically teams that even missed like a Columbus, around the same time when that was rumored to kind of be the team that might be on the outs because of it. And I think there's bad when it is held in context to something like that, where it shows that maybe the teams that might be most deserving might not necessarily be a part of this tournament. I do not think that's where you want to go with this tournament down the line, right? But I do think that it also, you're kind of like grandfathering in and setting the precedent for, if there's a really important player or team that you want to be there based on where this is going to be hosted in the future, you just found a backdoor way to make sure that you always have that team in and you can control the narrative, if you're FIFA, of how you do that, right? So it's because you're just doing it in a country itself. Like Minnesota United could have been deemed the host. Like, it's never going to happen, but like, you get my point. It's pretty much it's the eye of the beholder. It's the reason as to why FIFA wanted it to happen. They chose Inter Miami because they know that that's where the eyeballs are going to go and that's going to sell tickets. So I think that makes kind of the memeability of MLS. I think it like kind of it notches the dial of that up to like 10x with like how that happened. But I don't think it's going to be unique to MLS when we go 4 years into the future and whoever hosts is
even with Club America,
right?
America, I think FIFA were beating themselves up when they didn't get in.
Yeah, and we're part of that playing game for a reason. It pretty much, when you're looking at that playing game, I think that's a really good example too, Pix, because I think that playing game was a perfect example of like, realistically, that probably should have been the teams that were like the second place, the runners up in like some of the continental competitions over those 2 years, probably should have been the two teams that were represented. But the thing that made the most sense was you have a major market in LA that's not currently representing, but also did happen to lose to that team. So it made sense to have them there. Right. Mm-hmm. And was the team that really should have been one of the representatives just based on how it actually like probably should have gone. But then you had Club America that was the number one in CONCACAF rankings based on like, there was like 2 or 3 different charts that I saw with CONCACAF rankings based on like how things have been stockpiled over the last 3 or 4 years.
Exactly.
Like, Club America was number 1, I think, on like 1 or 2 of the 3, but it's like, where are we getting, like what criteria are we using? It seems so subjective and arbitrary just based on, we know Club America is by far the team that's going to sell the most tickets within the North American region. That's what FIFA would want. So it's like, if FIFA wants us to take this tournament seriously, well, I shouldn't say us, because I'm excited about it regardless, but if they want the casual fans or the people that have some issues and some qualms with FIFA where they will boycott or they are not going to just like take FIFA's word as gospel and just kind of buy their bullshit, then if that's the case, then they do need to start making sure that things like that, they need to really kind of catch themselves before they start making some of these decisions, in my opinion, because it devalues the field, and I feel like it waters down the field to a degree just based on what you want the narrative to be, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Totally does. What about you, Pix? Do you feel the same way? Similar? Different?
Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting because I think that it depends on what team you're talking about. I think Seattle have different, expectations and things that they want out of the tournament and public perception on the tournament. I think Miami have a huge point to prove, but at the same time, it's like they've tried to prove it, in the Conca Champions, they weren't able to. They tried to prove it last year in the league, they weren't able to. So it's going to be really interesting, and I don't think it's going to be great for the league if they crash out and burn. And with the group that they're in, it could be a possibility. So I think that some of what I don't think that the MLS was really necessarily prepared to make it the most competitive for their teams necessarily. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how competitive they are. But I'm not really sure how excited even MLS fans are of those respective teams for them to compete, especially because, I think LAFC especially and Miami especially have fans where, they've been able to compete in huge competitions already, in Seattle as well, obviously. But, if we had teams like, let's say, Minnesota competing in this, I think that all the fans would be able to, really, gather around and really push the team forward. But I feel like there's a lot of indifference among Miami fans, LAFC fans, and even some Seattle fans as well. So I think that it's going to be interesting, and there's a lot of issues, especially with having the Club World Cup here in the United States and having that indifference amongst, some of the players, especially when you have I know a lot of Europeans who are fans of Bayern, who are fans of, Chelsea, who are fans of these big teams, and their fan bases aren't as passionate about the Club World Cup, but you could see the players' quotes and all that stuff, and they might be getting paid to say it, but they're still saying the right things that show that, like Mueller's talking about how excited he is about playing in this competition. So it's going to be really interesting to see how they compare with each other. But I think it's going to hurt the MLS a little bit in the sense of the perception of it. And I think that especially seeing some of the results that go down, if MLS teams aren't able to be that competitive, it's going to, lead to a poor result.
Yeah, definitely a lot of chances for MLS teams to embarrass themselves a little bit. It's kind of crazy that there's three MLS teams there. Obviously we are hosting the tournament, so that always kind of tends to help a little bit. And the whole Inter Miami situation just creates a whole nother layer to that situation. But I mean, I don't know. I feel indifferent to it. It's hard to tell how much of an impact this has because, it's every 4 years.
Exactly.
And I'm curious to see how different I would feel about it too once it gets hosted outside of the United States, for wherever it goes next time, and how an MLS team travels and what that is like as opposed to being here. Also, we're one of I'm not sure what other teams, what the Australian league looks like, but they're doing this tournament, mid-season of our season, as opposed to the end of season for a lot of these teams too. So it's kind of just a different dynamic for us as well. So definitely. I'm curious to see how it goes. But before we wrapped up the not so good biz, I wanted to ask you: was there any other points about the Club World Cup that you just wanted people to know about? Anything to highlight? Just last thoughts before we kind of talk about how we will be kind of predicting it in the Discord?
Not that I can really think of. I think, realistically, I think with where we're at with this, I just think that I guess the thing that I would want to say to everybody listening out there, if you're on the fence about it, or you just are you really don't care about it, I just hope everybody goes into this with just a standpoint of trying to go in with a sense of curiosity on it, because I feel like what I always go into an actual World Cup going into is really excited about just getting to know more about teams that I might not be super familiar with. And I think the biggest thing that I hear a lot of the times with within my own community, being that we're more associated with Football Manager on Twitch, all three of us. I feel like the European sentiment that I've heard about this tournament is the fact that it's not necessarily worth their time to watch. That don't really care about it, and there might be others that share that sentiment outside of Europe. But I guess the biggest thing that I would say is really try to look for the other stories that are existing outside of just maybe the team, or the team you support, or if you don't have a team that you support, and just grab onto following a team for the sake of following a team, man. I think that's the beauty of why I love sports in general, is the fact that you can just you can grab onto a story and just kind of really just follow along and get kind of immersed in a team's narrative and their story and where they're heading and how they're overcoming adversity or dealing with adversity at the time of it actually happening. And I think that's the beauty of a lot of this. So like I said, I love the underdog story. So any of these teams from the African Confederation, any of these teams from the Asian Confederation, I am watching those games. I will be there with bells on, man. I can't wait to see all those teams get ready to go. So I'd encourage you guys, if you are on the fence or just you don't feel like you got anything for you. Take that into consideration and just do what I do and just root for the upset, man. And if you need to, even throw a couple extra dollars on there just for the hell of it, because that makes it even more
just
fun.
To feel something.
Yeah, you got to feel a little something, right?
What about you, Pix? Any last thoughts about the Club World Cup?
Yeah, I just want to say I think that one of the most exciting things about soccer for me is seeing these inter-club competitions. I remember when we won the Libertadores in 2016, I got up super early. It was like 4 a.m. and I was watching us play against the Japanese team, and we got fucking demolished. It was like 3-0. I woke up right before school, and I had the preconceived notion. I was like, oh, we're facing a Japanese team. We won the Libertadores. Of course we're going to go through. We're going to face Real Madrid in the final. I was already with that expectation. So I love these competitions because they just turn you on your ass. The Japanese team completely destroyed us and showed me a soccer that, my high school self hadn't really seen before. So those sort of storylines are going to be put, times 32 in a sense. And that's what I'm excited for. And, those matches are some memories that a lot of fans are going to have for a long time. So that's really what I'm excited for, is a lot of people being able to see their teams playing against teams that they might never even see for the rest of their lives, and being it in a competitive environment. So that's what I'm really excited for, and sharing it with you guys as well.
Wow, so wholesome!
What a good guy!
So wholesome. Well, to be fair, Pix, your sentiment right at the end, not the part about sharing it with you guys. I don't care about that. But the sentiment that you said about the teams like that you'd never get to see again. I was looking again, a little passively as I was looking stuff up for the episode, and just the smaller matchups in regards to the games that I can go see at the Rose Bowl, dude, I can't keep getting this wrong. The Red Diamonds playing against
I got you.
The Red Diamonds playing against Monterey. It's
That's
like
awesome.
Monterey I could see in my lifetime again. They're just a little south of the border, but the Red Diamonds, I don't. When will I ever see that unless I go to Japan? And then also I have a chance to see Atletico Madrid. I could go see Atletico Madrid PSG, but that's going to be a heinous ticket price. But Atletico Madrid against Botafogo, that would be fire.
That's
when
pretty
am I
fire.
ever going to see a Brazilian club team? They might come do some friendlies and stuff like that, but to play against Atletico Madrid here at the Rose Bowl, where, to be fair, and I will shout this out, and this kind of adds to my sentiment, anyone in the United States, I know a lot of I was looking at all the stadiums that are being hosted, only 2 on the West Coast, California and Seattle.
I looked too. There's nothing in I didn't
nothing
realize.
In the middle.
Chicago,
nothing in Texas.
Cincinnati and Nashville would be the 2 closest for me, which is insane.
That's crazy.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And nothing in Texas, which I'm super surprised about. Maybe just because it's so humid, to be honest. And, that maybe, in retrospect, that's probably why, to be honest. But if you can go find one of the cheaper ticket games, I'm seeing even, in Los Angeles where, they will gouge the shit out of you for ticket prices. I could go see Atletico Madrid and Botafogo for $33 a ticket. That's before the fees, so that's probably like $80 or something. But still, that's pretty good. And Atletico Madrid is and Botafogo for real football fans. That is no joke. So. I might have to. It's a Monday at 12 p.m. though. That's kind of crazy.
That's the biggest issue. Yeah,
maybe that's.
Did you say Inter Milan and Monterey too? Inter Milan and Monterey.
Is that one at the Rose Bowl?
That's at the Rose Bowl on the 17th.
Oh wow.
Oh wow. The only thing is, Seattle gets all home games too. They play only at Seattle.
It's the only thing they have going for them in that game.
That's why the owner got pissed. He wants to get the World Cup. He's trying to rake in that money.
And I was thinking,
Morris's contract is
exactly. I was also thinking they need those bonuses. How is Areola going to keep those icy tips blonde, man? He's got to. All right, we're getting derailed here. I think that is a pretty good overview of the Club World Cup. It's not the definitive overview, but it's our overview, and that's all we can give you. But we're going to wrap up quickly here in terms of one thing we're going to be doing in the Discord, so definitely join that. We are going to be doing bracket predictions in there. Does the brackets go? Does it go all the way to the final, like group stage?
I don't know.
Games.
Pix, did you find one that? I'm assuming that it will be. I'm assuming it will be that way, but
I haven't found one yet, but there will be one. Right. There will be one.
So we're putting unconfirmed things in the document now.
If not, I'll make one. I'll make one.
Yeah, okay. We'll figure it out.
There will be some sort of bracket challenge in our Discord, and next week we'll be dropping another episode that will take a more detailed look into certain aspects of the Club World Cup. We haven't decided what we specifically want to talk about. We might deep dive into one team. We might deep dive into a certain story, but we want to just get really, really specific on you before all of it kicks off, because the official kickoff game is... When the hell is it? It's
The
Inter
14th,
Miami, right?
Yep, June 14th, Saturday, Al Ali and Inter Miami.
Oh wow, that's 10 days. That's kind of soon.
Yeah, it's
awesome.
Yeah, it's right here.
Awesome.
I can't wait. I'm super hyped for it.
And another thing to do is, if you guys join the Discord, I'm sure we're going to be watching a lot of games, talking about a lot of the games. So
yep,
that's probably the best place to talk about any Club World Cup content. If you have any insane predictions you guys want before they happen, feel free to write those down. I have Palmeiras as my dark horse, so I'm jotting that one down already.
I like it. And I won't speak for all of us, but I do think that we probably, being that these are free, we'll try to figure out. Stay tuned on the next pod, because we'll probably talk it over and talk about maybe some of these for watch parties. I think for us, we wanted to find some stuff that is easier and more accessible for our viewers and listeners to be able to tag along on Twitch with us when we are doing a live watch party. So we'll try to find one in the next calendar couple of weeks that makes sense, and just kind of do the pre-show and talk it out with everybody and just kind of hang out for one of the games. So
yeah, I like that. And if I go to a game, I'll bring my entire IRL streaming kit and be really obnoxious in the stands. But all right, guys. Thank you, as always. A little bit of a special type of episode today about the Club World Cup. We're going to be experimenting with different styles of episodes, a little shorter. Maybe some days we'll go, Lord of the Rings style length of a podcast, 3 hours marathon.
Extended uncut.
Exactly. all the stuff's like, what did we want to talk about today? The bathroom breaks, the full immersive experience. But I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Like I said, there will be another Club World Cup episode coming next week. I hope you guys enjoyed. As always, I am Dill40K. This is the Something About Soccer podcast. BizarraBrigade, Pixelated. We will see you guys in the next one. Thank you, and make sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff. Thank you. Peace.